This is Wings on the Air.
Hi, welcome to Wings on the Air. My name is Ann Edenfield-Sweet. I'm the Executive Director and the founder of Wings for Life International. And today we are going to talk about advice and get advice about relationships from Mary Pepper, an expert in family relationships. And Mary, I'm just so thrilled that you're here today. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how did you get involved in family relationships and how did you become an expert in this field?
Well, it's amazing how my life experiences and my academia kind of complement each other and have brought me to this point. I grew up in an Irish Catholic family, 8 children, mom and dad, and we learned about healthy relationship dynamics just in that family of origin as I was growing up, and then became married, had our own children. But in the academia world, I have a degree in elementary education, early childhood specialist, and also a master's in family studies. Somehow throughout the years of my life, people have always come to me for advice on relationships. Even in high school, I was Dear Belinda, you know, Dear Abby? They would write to me for the high school newspaper, Dear Belinda, this and this problem. And I'd go and give them all these options and different thoughts. So somehow relationships have always been a very important part of my life. And, you know, there's so many people that have challenges with relationships because we're unique individuals trying to figure out how to deal with each other. And so it's so important to understand all the dynamics that go along with relationships.
Well, you talk about major ideas that relationships, that your clients have. And so let's talk about some of those major ideas that have impacted your clients along the way.
So one of the concepts is an area where there's 4 different traits that each of us have within us. But before we go and identify those 4 traits, I want to talk to you about the word nurture. Okay. What does the word nurture mean? Just kind of form a foundation here because we're going to be using that word a lot. Nurture. Nurture means to give kindness, care, compassion, to support, to help, to be respectful. Can you think of some ideas of being a nurturer? How have you been a nurturer maybe in the last few months?
Oh my, I try to nurture all the time. And of course at Wings for Life, that's what we try to do too. We try to nurture folks, give them positive reinforcement, to be there for them, just those pats on the back, the great to see you, how are you doing kind of thing, and bringing out what have you been doing that is positive. So nurturing just to be there for somebody, I think.
It's so important to nurture ourselves as well as others. And so these 4 traits, 2 of them have to do with the word nurture. Nurturer, that's when we are giving the kindness, care, and compassion to others. Nurtured, with the ED at the end, that's when we're receiving kindness, care, and compassion. So if we look at each of those a little bit, you know, we need to think about what do we do in our everyday life to nurture ourselves, because it's important to take care of ourselves, or to nurture others? You know, do we give ourselves positive messages? You know, maybe growing up we heard a lot of negative messages. You know, you're going to end up a bum, you're not worth anything. Can we do a new tape in our head about, you know, I am worthy, I am something good, I can do good things in my life? So we can nurture ourselves, but then also all the people around us in our lives, no matter where we are at. Can we offer a smile? Can we share something with them? Can we support them when they're having a downtime? On the flip side, though, is nurtured. So how often do we allow ourselves to receive kindness, care, and compassion? You know, depending on our family of origin, our life experiences, some people have a wall, a big wall.
Yes, I think sometimes it's harder for people to receive that love and accept that and be nurtured, accept that nurturing. Yeah, tell us more about that. How does a person that didn't grow up with that, how do you teach them to allow somebody to nurture them?
Well, so much of it goes into trust, you know, and so if a person has grown up with abuse and pain or they're neglected, it's really difficult because they never had that model of being nurtured. So they don't know what it feels like, nurturer, nurtured. You know, they go hand in hand with mom or dad or grandma or grandpa there to nurture you, give you kindness and compassion, and you welcomed it and received it. But if there was abuse or pain or neglect, we put up that wall that tells everybody around us, we don't want you in because we don't know what you're going to do to us. And so we have to begin the tiny little steps. Are there people that we can trust? Is it okay to open up a little crack in that wall? Whether it's a cashier giving us a smile, whether, it's somebody where we're at right now that just gives a word of encouragement. Is it someone who shares something with us? Can we accept a gift from somebody? Some advice. How many of us put up a big wall instead of saying, oh yeah, that might be a good idea to try that? We just say, no, we don't want advice or ideas from anybody. So nurtured is one part of the model of the traits that are inside us.
Okay. And so now you've talked about people that did grow up as victims. And so let's talk a little bit about perpetrators and victims. So how does that all fit into this scheme of things?
So those are the other two traits. So we have 4 traits: nurturer, nurtured, perpetrator, and victim.
Okay.
So the perpetrator-victim kind of frame, a perpetrator gives hurt and pain to themselves or to others. Okay? Direct opposite of nurturer. Nurturer gives kindness, care, and compassion. Perpetrator gives hurt and pain. The victim receives hurt and pain from others or from themselves. I've known people who are cutters. They're perpetrator and victim to themselves. But victim is direct opposite of being nurtured. Nurtured is receiving kindness, care, and compassion, versus victim is receiving hurt and pain. And so, along our journey of life, it's important for us to look at our family of origin. What was the model that was used in our family of origin, the family we grew up in? Did the family spend most time in the nurturer-nurtured model, or did they spend most of the time in the perpetrator-victim model? And so whatever is familiar is usually comfortable. And so for people to know that, wow, maybe I grew up perpetrator-victim model, but there's another option, there's another way of doing things. And all this hurt and pain, I need to figure out how to deal with it and maybe find another way to live.
We do a lot of work in prisons. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of our folks, of course, probably fall in that perpetrator-victim scenario. And so how do you teach somebody that that's all they know? They grew up that way, maybe their grandparents, maybe they saw that with their grandparents, aunts and uncles, whatever. They didn't see that positive nurturing side. So how do you start to develop that? And how do you do that? If somebody were in prison, what advice would you have for somebody in prison that, okay, you can start to make some changes here? And how do you do that?
Well, one, we need to look at the wall that they have, to protect themselves. Because of the perpetrator-victim model that they lived in, they have this big wall. So they're not even open to someone being kind and caring and gentle to them. And so it's looking at giving them this information, giving them these ideas and saying, there's another way of living. Even though you grew up in, these situations, other people live differently. And maybe you can make some of those choices for you to live differently. So having the education and the ideas help people to open up their mind. For example, one of my clients, Jose had a pretty good childhood for about 5 or 6 years, him and his brother. But then his brother died in a car accident. The brother had been the golden apple boy.
Oh boy.
Mom just loved him to death. And when he died, Mom fell apart. And she took all her anger out on Jose. In the middle of the night, she'd come in and whip him.
Oh, dear.
She'd drive him to school, and halfway there, she'd stop the car and say, get out of the car. Stand in front of it. I want to run you over and kill you because your brother's dead. I mean, It was awful. And he grew up in this model. And so as an adult, he continued that model. Abused his wife, abused his children, because that was the only model he knew. He didn't remember any time before his brother died, which was probably a halfway decent time. And so when we did this lesson in class, it was amazing because his eyes just lit up. He had never heard of the term nurturer or nurtured. He was clueless, never experienced it. And afterwards, he told me he went to a parking lot and he cried. He bawled his eyes out for 2 hours.
Wow.
And he wanted to make it up to his wife and children. He wanted to open some doors. He wanted to be nurturing and allow them to nurture him. But it's tiny, tiny steps at a time. So just hearing this video gives people an opportunity to think, wow, what is nurturing? Nurturing is using a calm, gentle voice. It's being thoughtful. Nurtured, letting other people give you a smile, share something with you, or be kind to you. And it's just an amazing idea for us to think about.
When we go into the prisons, we, of course, try to teach these things, and we try to model these things. Mm-hmm. And we teach Search Institute's 40 developmental assets that it's nurturing all the way through, and it's teaching and being supportive, but educating people at the same time. And so I think it's a combination of the education, building an awareness. So hopefully somebody is watching today that will hear this and know that just because you grew up in this kind of environment doesn't mean that you have to stay that way. But I think you're right. It's those tiny little steps that, okay, start that tiny crack in the wall. Maybe I'll be nice to somebody today. Maybe I'll say thank you. Just going to the store clerk, thank you, instead of just grabbing something and running and going. Maybe dropping your kids off at school. I love you. Or if that's too hard to say, maybe.
Yes.
Have a good day, or anything. I mean, I think it has to start very small. Don't you think?
It definitely has to start very, very small. And people have to be intentional. They have to pick and choose what do they want to do. It's interesting to look at percentages. So when I have people in mentoring sessions or the group classes, we have the 4 areas: nurturer, nurtured, perpetrator, victim. And I says, out of 100%, kind of analyze yourself. How much time do you spend as a nurturer? How much time do you spend as being nurtured? How much time do you spend as a perpetrator? And how much time do you spend as a victim? So let's just say, for example, a person would say, well, they're a nurturer 20% of the time, nurtured 10% of the time, perpetrator 50% of the time, and victim 20% of the time. They have those numbers there. And then they could kind of work with those numbers and think, wow, do I want to stay 70% of the time in my life down in perpetrator victim? Or do I want to figure out how to do 20 and 10, the 30% on top, and move up there somehow? Can I use a calm, loving voice? Can I be gentle and caring? Can I not yell and scream? Can I not curse at people? Can I just be silent instead of lashing out at people? So all these little choices that we can make in our everyday life.
That's all very interesting, because I'm trying to think about my own life here. And I hope I don't feel like I'm a victim at any time, and I hope I'm not a perpetrator. I certainly don't try to do that. I think of myself as more nurturing. I know my husband spoils me a lot, and I don't think about, okay, now I'm being nurtured, but I am. Every morning when he makes a cup of coffee for me, which he does every single morning, he spoils me. That is a way of being nurtured. But I don't sit there and identify, okay, I'm being nurtured through this. But when I'm fixing dinner or doing laundry and folding his clothes and putting his clothes away, I guess that's a way that I'm nurturing. But he's being nurtured by having those kinds of things done. What other kind of simple examples could you give us about ways to nurture?
Well, just to follow up on your point, that you're not sure that you spend very much time as perpetrator or victim. Reality is each of these traits are in each of us.
Oh,
and so,
okay.
Sometimes if I'm tired and hungry, the perpetrator comes out in me. And I might yell at my husband, and so if I wasn't hungry and tired, maybe it would have been more nurturing. But, what we also need to do is look at what brings out each of these traits in us.
Okay.
When I'm rested and feel comfortable, when I'm in a trusting, safe situation, the nurturer will come out. So we need to look at what brings out these different traits. And victims, whether we choose to or not, if our car was broken into, if somebody bullied us in school, there's all different aspects where we were a victim at one point to another. But being a nurturer is something that it's good to find models in our everyday world. You know, whether there's somebody in your location right now who just has that extra little edge of kindness that the other people around you don't have. You know, watch them, observe them. Nurturers are very good listeners as well. And, you know, just to give people the gift of your time, the gift of your presence, instead of being short and being away and just not focusing, but giving somebody the gift of your time. So I think in your everyday lives, your examples of your home, you're making dinner for the family, or somebody's making coffee for you, all those are great examples of nurturer and nurtured. Somebody let you in traffic instead of cutting you off in traffic. They're nurturing you. In our everyday world, we can see great opportunities. My husband is one of these strong, healthy males, and he used to go and carry like 5 grocery bags into the house. And I'd say, you know, can I open the door? No, I'll get it myself. You know, he's proud. He wants to carry the packages and open the door himself. He's a man. And so when I introduced him to these concepts, we started playing with the word, and I'd say, Dave, please let me nurture you. Please, please, let me open the door for you. And so now we just kind of tease and, okay, you're going to let me nurture you. I can open the door. So again, there's that wall, you know, for various reasons, but there's many, many examples.
You know, I love that, okay, Dave, let me nurture you. Using that and kind of making people aware of it. In fact, I think I'll go home today and say, now, Doug, you've been nurturing me all this time, and I didn't put that word to it. Yeah. But I think when we start putting positive words to things, that it will help people to identify what are you doing and how is your behavior being perceived. And our children, so many of our children, especially if they're being bullied in school, they don't feel safe in school. Mm-hmm. Dad or mom is in prison and everybody is making fun of them. How come your parents aren't here at school, at sporting events, whatever? You can't even play sports because you don't have any money for these kinds of things. I mean, we've got to teach people how can you react in a positive way and not let that victim side come out.
Most definitely. It's so important to think about how we can respond instead of react. Because a lot of people just react. You know, and
yes,
the reacting just
yeah.
isn't always the best way to respond to somebody, especially when we're hurt and somebody's being mean. And so taking those deep breaths and sometimes walking away gives us time to reflect and respond over time. And walking away sometimes is one of the better ways to deal with bullies because we don't want to give them our time, energy, and attention. And sometimes walking away is a very helpful thing to do.
Now, if somebody doesn't have somebody in their life who they would consider as loving and kind, and
yes.
some people behind bars, they don't. That doesn't bring out the healthiest environment. Mm-hmm. How would one go about bringing out kindness?
Yeah, it's amazing. My programs has been quite a few people who they don't know anyone who's nurturing, and they've never been nurtured, and in their world, everything's about hurt and pain. And so I suggest for them to take a moment and think about the perfect nurturer. The perfect nurturer is our dear Lord, our Savior. And He is the perfect nurturer that He will hold you in His arms. He will guide you. He will teach you. He will love you. He will be kind, caring, and compassionate. And no matter where you're at, no matter what's going on in your life, He is always, always there for you. And we need to be open to Him, though. Just real short, there was a time in my life I was totally paralyzed, where I could not walk, talk, breathe. I could not talk. And the only one I could talk to was God. And He was always, always there. No one else could nurture me in what I needed because of my medical situation. And so know that 24/7, no matter the worst situation you're in, God's always within you. And He's always there to listen. He's always here. And I was angry with Him, man. I yelled and screamed at God over and over and over again. And He just held me in His arms. He just helped me to be calm. And He just always was there. his presence was something that I always felt. And so, again, no matter what prison people are in, because we're in emotional prisons, I was in a medical prison, whatever our prison walls are, they're all different walls that people are in. Even rich people have their own walls.
Absolutely.
Of, whatever their challenges are. So whatever walls we are in, to know that if we reach out and just talk to him, to me, having conversations with God is one of the best things in the world. And then just be silent and just know he's there, and listen, and in your hardest and darkest times, talk with him.
Oh, that's wonderful, wonderful advice, and absolutely true. And of course, we know that in the prison system, that anybody that's involved in a faith-based program, the recidivism rate, return to prison rate, is much, much lower. And so, of course, we always encourage people to whatever faith community it is, get involved in the faith community, know God. And I think if that is true, but again, people have to be open to God, and they have to be open to receiving that calmness in their hearts, which a lot of times they don't have. I'm sure, Mary, you've worked with so many families. What kind of stories do you have? You've shared the one about the young man whose mother was just really abusive, but she was so hurting with that. But do you have some more stories about people that came to you and really didn't know how to be that nurturer and receive nurture, and yet they are today? Tell us some positive stories.
Well, I think there's so many of them that began to do the little things. Instead of being angry a lot, trying to stay calm. So a lot of it has to do with the emotions, because our emotions affect our choices and our behavior. So people started focusing on if they were reacting or responding, taking that breath and thinking, okay, she just said this to me and I want to just lash out at her, but let me take a breath. Let me realize that, she didn't sleep all night because the baby's been up all night, and, it's not time for me to lash out at anybody. So it's stepping back. You think about being on a football field. Some people are in a huddle and some people are in the stand. And if you're in the stand, you could observe it from way back there and just have a different outlook on it. So there's so many people that, on the first day when I introduced the nurturing concept, and then on the very last day of our sessions, that's usually their gigantic growth area. But it's over time, whether I used to be closed off, and now I'm letting a few people in, and I'm beginning to trust again. But it's hard. It's a hard journey to begin to trust. And so to open those doors, but always go back, if you do have faith, that God has your back, and God will help you to discern who you can open that door to and who the door needs to stay closed for, because there's certain people we don't want to let in.
You triggered for me when you started saying you started here and in your classes, and then they ended up over here. At Wings for Life, we try to be consistent. We try to demonstrate the same thing over and over again. We try to be kind and caring. We try to listen. We eat around the dinner table and we listen to one another, and then we respond back to what they've said. So everybody is given a chance to be heard. And I think it's so important to find an arena where somebody can put themselves into a healthier environment. Because some home lives are not real healthy. Right. Certainly life in prison cannot be the healthiest place in the world to be. And yet, I go into faith-based units in the prisons, and they are some of the most godly places I've been in the world. And so I think it starts, you're the expert, so you tell us, but doesn't it start with finding those models for you and putting yourself in that environment where you can start practicing these healthier behaviors?
Most definitely. If we can find those environments in whatever areas we're in, it does make a big difference. But I think also we need to take the time to really evaluate our family of origin and the projection, and know that our family of origin, the family we grew up in, does not define who we are and who we're going to become. So to know that there's options along this way, because some people think in their mind they're just going to stay on this trajectory. And we don't have to stay on any trajectory. We can evaluate, we can work really, really hard. And whenever there's an opportunity for knowledge, reading books, talking to people, talking to God, and finding healthy models in our world, in whatever part of society we're in, so that we can also, develop those skills. I mean, we think about the concentration camps, right?
Yeah.
And there were those people that no matter how horrific the situation was, they still shared their food. They still held the people who were dying. They still gave somebody a smile. And they were horrific situations. So deep down within us, we all have so much good. And trust that each of you have all some wonderful good in you. And sometimes we have to kind of dig to find it. But find that good and develop it and bring it out. And wherever you can find some healthy role models, try to connect with them so that you learn how to do this model of being nurturer, nurtured, and spend less time in perpetrator-victim model.
Absolutely. So our goal, I think what I'm hearing is perpetrator victim, we don't want to be spending much time there at all, and eliminate as much of that as we can. Learn to be the nurturer and learn how to receive nurture as well. And I think for some people that's a little hard, but I like the idea of defining those words. So this is what I'm doing.
Yes.
Any last thoughts, Mary?
Just believe in yourself and understand that you can make positive changes, and you can become more nurturing and receive nurturing as well.
Well, I'd like to thank Mary so much for being here today. I knew this was going to be a great show because it's so important that we become those nurturers and we receive that nurture in our lives. So I know that you've learned a lot. I certainly have learned a lot. We thank you for being with us today on Wings on the Air. It's sponsored by Rainstar Group Capital, managed by Regional Director Bob Moore. And Bob can be reached at 505-331-4246. And of course, you can always contact us at our website, wingsforlifeinternational.org. Call us at 505-291-6412. Again, that number, 505-291-6412. Thanks so much. Have a great day.
Wings on the Air is sponsored by Rainstar Capital Group.